Hello, and welcome to Transition Tea, the podcast dedicated to demystifying the world of healthcare transition and activation planning. I'm your host, Kelly Guzman, President and CEO of Yellow Brick Consulting. And today I am honored to have Connie Senner joining us. So Connie, welcome to our podcast. And can you please provide our listeners with a background about you?
Thanks for having me, Kelly. Yeah, my name's Connie Senner. I am Director of Design and Construction at a large hospital in Southern California, Torrance Memorial Medical Center. And I had an interesting path to get to this role. And it actually started, I'll say, in the dental field, because that led me to an opportunity to take on a role of office manager for a cardiovascular surgeon. I mean, if you can do billing for dental fillings, you certainly can bill for an open heart surgery, right? So that's kind of been the template for my life, is like taking these big bites of things and catching up in my learning to eventually, master a role. But when I was working at that cardiovascular thoracic surgeon's office, I became very proficient with the computer system they were using, and the company recruited me away to try to influence physicians to move away from a pegboard system and onto, the 21st century of computers. And through that process, developed a relationship with Torrance Memorial, being a potential customer, and they agreed to purchase the computer system for physician offices that they were starting up in practice in the South Bay, and then recruited me away from that firm in order to run their program. They felt like the physician program was completely geared upon the computer system, the billing management system. And it was an interesting experience coming into the fold, being brought by administrators who were running a hospital, thinking that they could certainly run a medical office building and, template physician practices. This was in the day when HMO medicine was taking off. So they were really trying to support the community with starting a lot of physicians up in practice. So that was my initial role at Torrance Memorial Medical Center, was helping them establish physician practices within our community.
That's a great background. I didn't know any of that, so thank you for sharing. And it's just interesting to me, the number of people we meet with, just their path of how they got to where they are. And I would say the one commonality, and you mentioned that, was kind of being bold and taking leaps. And I've known you for many years and certainly admire that quality about you. So thank you. And today we are going to be drinking Blueberry Fields Forever. And it's tea I was sharing with you earlier from David's Tea in Canada, which I've fallen in love with. There's so many amazing teas, but it has not just blueberries, but apple and oolong and hibiscus and elderberry and pomegranate. So delicious. So listeners, grab a cup of whatever you'd like, and you can join us for our transition chat. So you talked about your first job in healthcare, but when we met at Torrance, you were opening up the new Lundquist Tower, which is, quite the endeavor. So can you share information about that project and your role on that project?
Yeah, that project landed in my lap, I will say, after I had been involved in construction activities, my responsibilities as construction director for a number of years. And that project changed my life in many ways. It was a 390,000 square foot addition to the hospital, and extremely complex, state of California. So it was an OSHPD project, heavily inspected, and a lot of challenges during the course of a 7-year project. It was great. One of the things I like about my job so much is it's such a wonderful opportunity to be involved from concept through the design process, through the construction process, through the fit up process, through the transition process, and then, activating the space and seeing it operate on a day-to-day basis. So I feel my role at Torrance Memorial, being such a vast spectrum, is a wonderful opportunity. Not a lot of organizations, I think, are structured our way to give, that way to give someone in my role an opportunity to see all of those elements in one project.
Yeah. You talk about the continuum of being there from concept all the way through activation. Do you have a particular favorite part of the project? Because they are so different from, I know personally working on the design side, where it changes so much that sometimes I don't remember, like, well, what is the final product supposed to look like? And then we mostly work on the end, part of this, where we're activating and opening up the facility. So any favorite part of this whole process?
It's difficult for me to say that I have a favorite, because every aspect, I enjoy every aspect of it. And I think that's something that I really like about my job, is that, we wrap up design and then I move on to the next step and the next step and the next step. Although I will tell you, it's extremely gratifying day one of operations to see the fruit of your labor and all the work that you've put in net such wonderful results. So maybe that's my favorite, is just day one of activating the space and seeing people operate in it.
I would say many tears are shed on those days, and it does always amaze me, like walking through the day before, and you guys had super cool t-shirts. I remember, stay calm, it's move day, and everybody was excited. I think they were doing the shuffle in the OR, and, kind of the night before, they're like, this is never going to happen. And then the next day, surgeries are happening, emergencies are happening,
Yes.
People are in that space. So definitely an exciting time. So you've also, we've worked with you to open up a department, a NICU, and then an outpatient area where you're taking a cancer center from a very lovely, part of town and moving it onto campus. So how are those projects, or how are those different than the Lundquist Tower project?
Yeah, I sort of think of it, the analogy I'll use is planning a wedding. And I've done 3 of those, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. But, whether or not you're having 20 guests, 200 guests, or 2,000 guests, you still have to go through a checklist for all of the same type of activities. You need a florist, you need a photographer, and so on. So with these projects, whether it's a 16,000 square foot department renovation, or, a large complex project like the Lundquist Tower, you have the same types of tasks that you have to move through, the same type of processes to get the space licensed, but the number of tasks on your task list might be a little shorter. It might be a shorter task list than you're working with. But, as activating a neonatal intensive care unit is a very intense experience. And so, you really can't gauge a project based on the square footage or the cost of the project. It really comes down to what's involved in the day-to-day workings of the nurses and the caregivers to meet the needs of the patient, visitors, volunteers, physicians, staff of any given transition. So they're all unique.
No, it's a great point. And I know for me, I always thought, like, well, it's a smaller project and it'll be easier. And I feel a lot of times that it's actually harder, because there aren't the attention either from the executive team, or even, the support and ancillary teams. Like you mentioned, like, you still have to do everything. So, when you've got that big project, there's sometimes like strictly dedicated resources that don't exist in some of these smaller ones. But You know, for the NICU in particular, we have done a lot. And I remember the very first NICU we ever did where we're taking people in this open room where you can see everything, you can hear everybody, and we're going to put them in their private room. So how did you deal with, or how do you deal with, is there like a special approach you have for change management when you're thinking about really, you know, kind of flipping their world upside down to being able to touch and see each other to now there's walls and barriers to work with that staff, as you mentioned, the nurses, the physicians, the social workers. So how do you work with the team to help them prepare to really embrace that change and be able to work on day one in the new facility?
Before we start intensely interacting with staff, we consider it our jobs to do the research. We certainly have tapped into Yellow Brick to look for other similar templates. Who else has done this? What are their successes? What have been their challenges, lessons learned? I know from the NICU project, you know, we had a lot of nervous nurses who we had to earn their respect and their trust before we stepped into their world and, you know, tried to help them navigate this new environment. And, you know, I think it's a challenge many times because on the construction side of things, many times we're working with managers, directors, vice presidents in designing and planning spaces. And the frontline caregivers, the nurses, don't have as much input to the design, referencing their workflow than might be valuable to the project. You know, I think in retrospect, many times I have felt that we should involve more of the people who are firsthand involved in the workflow in designing these spaces. But I can tell you that I've gotten some looks and trying, you know, they're sizing me up, they're judging me in terms of how are you going to get us through this process? And it's so comforting to them, first of all, to work with a company like Yellow Brick where I'm not clinical. And so what I'm putting on the table to them might be taken with a grain of salt. And a clinical representative of Yellow Brick comes in and says the same thing that I just told the nurse, and somehow it goes over much better. So I think you need to know who you're working with, what makes them nervous, and do that research in advance to bring some comfort to the table as they're going through this very stressful experience. This is my full-time job. Those nurses have a full-time job. Mm-hmm. And guess what? It's not transition planning. So I think you have to have a sensitivity towards that when you're beginning the process of introducing them to their new space.
A great point. And I would say just in that, you're an amazing listener. So I think just being open to listening to those changes and the input, but it certainly is a difficult task to manage. So so with your projects, are there any special tools or templates or, you know, things that you use, like no matter for every project that you're approaching, are there any like favorite tools that you have that you use on every project?
Yeah, you know, we use the task list template with every project. I think having the tasks listed out with folks assigned and teaming up and being able to hold each other accountable for what you're supposed to be doing has helped us in organizing this, you know, the huge list of things that need to be accomplished. I think it takes what could be perceived as drinking from a fire hose and breaking it down into manageable bites. So the task list template is something that we use for all of our projects. For the larger projects where we know we have a change of environment that affects workflow, we certainly capitalize on the dress rehearsal process. We find that this exposure to the new space in true practice sessions where we can bring in supplies. Sometimes we're working with hard hats on, trying to pretend that it's day one of operations, but going through that process, it gets the staff over a hurdle where they might wonder, how is this really going to work? And I think once we get to the dress rehearsal process, you kind of can see the look of confidence, the air of confidence with staff having gone through that process. And then the other tool that we use for all of our projects is the issues log. Mm-hmm. And so this is an automated way to give everyone a look at what we're identifying as far as things that aren't working right, need attention, and prioritizing those issues so that you're tackling the things that are life safety and licensing related at the top of the list. And it's very interesting to see everyone buy into those lesser issues that don't need to be taken care of today, tomorrow, or the day that we move in. So those tools are extremely helpful.
It's funny because the task list, I feel like people have a love-hate relationship with it. Like when you're introduced to it, you absolutely hate it because there's 100, 200, 300 tasks, and it does seem a little daunting, but we try to do it in bite-sized pieces. But I have to say that when I go back and do the debrief with the clients at the end, they're like, we really needed that task list. Like that task list saved my life because everything is on there and you can go back and reference it. So I don't know how to, it's kind of like your medicine or your vegetables. You got to eat them.
Yes.
So, and I'd say the other thing about the issues list is it's another one because you're looking at those issues. And I think the beauty of the issues list is that when you do have a big project, or even if a small project, if everybody's putting their issues on the same list and somebody has a fire and life safety issue and somebody else is like, I don't like where the whiteboard is, it really helps to put things into perspective when there's 100 items and you're like, well, you're 100. The number one item is, they're having issues with their door, they're having access issues, or, just things that are really fundamentally wrong. And I do feel like it gives the entire organization that empathy to like, okay, I realize this isn't going to get taken care of, and have seen the managers go back and say, it's not going to get taken care of, guys. We're going to move in, it's going to be fine. And, people are resilient. So I think that's a great thing about healthcare. So
yeah, I think that is so true. So true. And I think, the little bit of psychology that I've learned with the issues log is generally I tell people, you know what, let's make sure we write everything down. I'm putting 3 things on the list right now. And by the way, I'm expecting 1,500. That's kind of what we generally run into. I'm hoodwinking them a little bit perhaps, but when they come away from the day and they say, oh, we only had 42. That's good, right? It kind of, again, from a perspective standpoint, helps them feel that what we've come up with during our time in the space and discovering the issues isn't as overwhelming as they may have thought it was going to be. And the issues are going to get taken care of pre-occupancy. The really tough issues that need to get done will get done. So it's helpful.
So another topic that is, I think, really a key skill and just like a management principle is time management and being able to prioritize what are the most important things. And your role, you have a huge role. You're in construction, you're managing multiple projects. And we were talking a little bit earlier about just COVID and all of the things that have had to change as a result of COVID, and you had your regular job. So how do you have any tips? Like, what do you do to like manage your time and prioritize what the most important things are? and then still go home and be able to do your bike ride, because I know you're an
Mm.
avid bike rider, and just have personal time. So how do you prioritize?
I am a list person. And I think also in my older, more mature age, have found myself really needing to write things down. And that works for me because I like crossing them off. I like seeing my productivity for the day. But it is a challenge to keep everything straight, especially when you are working on multiple projects at one time. So I think lists are very important. I also try to use my Outlook calendar effectively. I color code all of my appointments. And I also set aside time for travel time when it's required. My office is a little remote from the hospital, so just needing to get from one place to another. Everyone's looking at my Outlook schedule in order to schedule appointments with me. And if I don't put those buffers in for my travel time, I find myself just hightailing it across campus, and that creates stress for me. So, just trying to do little things like that. Technology certainly has been a great contributor to having that peace of mind when you leave the hospital at the end of the day, that you have your information with you if you need to access it. I like to have my information at hand so that I can readily answer questions when they come in after hours and so on. So that's been helpful as well.
There's never enough time in the day, I would say. So trying to prioritize.
I try to tell myself that it doesn't matter if I stay, in my chair at my desk until 10 o'clock tonight, I'm not going to be done with my work. So doesn't a hot bath and a cup of tea sound so much better than that? And I can rejuvenate myself for the next day and tackle it. I can tackle it all at, 7 o'clock the next morning.
I love it. I love it. So you're a woman in construction, and, I would say in the last 10 years, that's definitely changed. But you said, you've been in this job for over 10 years, and your background and your training, really, that's not what you started off like. You went to college, you got your degree, and then it's almost like this complete pivot. So how did you end up in construction, and how did that background prepare you for your role in construction now?
Yeah, well, my education is in early childhood development. And, it's very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of psychology classes and laboratory work that you do observing. There's a lot of observation that you take on during the course of study. And my path to Torrance Memorial via the cardiovascular surgeon's office, and my transition probably about 18 years ago now, within my 31 years at Torrance Memorial, stepped over to the construction environment. And, at that point in time, at a table of 25 people who are part of a design team working on a project, I was probably either the only female or maybe the second female at the table. We had a structural engineer that was a woman. Maybe you'd run into, you have your design firm represented at the table. And that has greatly evolved over the last 10 years. I felt as though I had to maybe prove something in the early days, gain respect. Once I found my place on the team, and, I don't have a construction management degree. My experience led me to this position and was built up by the mentors that I worked with over the course of my time within the construction environment. I mean, I would do crazy things, like I'd buy I'd buy some adult beverages, and I'd go to the architect's office on a Friday at 3 o'clock and say, I have this floor plan. Can you teach me how to read a reflected ceiling plan? People were very generous with me in my desire to take this role on and learn. And I'm extremely grateful for it. I know that I can't swing the hammer. I know what my limitations are, and I know what I bring to the table with the team. And I've had the opportunity to go out to junior high schools for career days and talk to the kids. And, life is different now. If you would have asked me when I was in junior high what that lady standing in front of the room does for a living, I teacher, nurse, I don't know. And I certainly wouldn't say construction manager or project manager. So the world has changed. I think it's changed for the better, and there aren't there's not as much stigma behind being a woman in construction anymore.
I've definitely seen a lot more women, and even a few teams that were more women than men. So we're out there, we're coming.
Yeah, and we're in very diverse roles, so watch out.
Definitely. Are there any skills that you feel really are essential to, to today's world? Like, so much has evolved, as you mentioned. So any skills or classes that, you would recommend or advise people who are getting into this field, this is just so essential, so critical?
Yeah, in thinking about that, I would say one of the most important things is to find a mentor, is someone who can inform you based on their personal experience. And I think if you are, going into project management specifically, it is definitely great to connect with your community college and get exposure through those types of courses. But I have really had such a wonderful experience, again, having people feel sorry for me maybe, and come alongside me and really help me get through some of the hurdles as far as exposure to my working environment. I mean, I'm doing everything from specifying finishes, purchasing task chairs, wayfinding for the campus, and then, real construction, overseeing things in the field, working with general contractors and engineers, and then part of the transition planning process as well. So, you're not going to be able to go to one course or even a series of courses, I think, to take all of that on. So don't be afraid to ask people about their experience and what they can share with you. I think people love sharing that kind of information, and it certainly is valuable to somebody who's getting their feet wet.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have some very good mentors, and probably would have went down some wild paths if I would have had somebody to kind of bounce an idea off of. So I also consider you a master communicator, and I'm sure you've been very frustrated, but from our side and working with you and the staff, really, you never seem flustered. But I know that there's some heated discussions that go on, and very big compromises, and tears happen, and tempers flare. So how do you manage or deal with just either abrasive personalities, or how do you talk to somebody who you have a completely different opinion, and you're like fighting for the end users or fighting for the staff? So how do you approach those people?
Yeah, I find that I'll just say I'm a work in progress when it comes to dealing with all of those things. I do try to listen. I do, and I have to talk myself through it. I have to really ask myself if what is about to come out of my mouth is going to contribute to the conversation. So, being thoughtful about what I'm hearing, and also I've learned that many of the discussions that are happening and the questions don't need to be addressed in the moment. It's okay to say, you know what, that's great information. I need to take a step back and really think about that, how it's going to impact the direction we were taking. We need to look at financially how that impacts the path that we're on. And I think people can appreciate giving you the time to do the research that you need to do and come back to the table and give them the no, if that's, where you're headed with it. But you listened to their point, and hopefully I think people feel valued in that process. And that's a lot of what I do is the team building aspect to get to the end product. And I rely a lot on relationship. So I try to put myself alongside people when we need to get the job done. I try to be the first one on site. I try to be the last one to leave. And I think when people experience that type of commitment, they can't help but trust you and respect you.
Well, you are definitely respected, and I know we enjoy working with you because of that camaraderie. And it isn't just one project. I mean, it's been every project we worked on with very different personalities and very different approaches. And, we've had to learn along the way, like, oh, this worked at Lundquist, but it's not going to work here, or this worked at the last project, but it isn't going to work here. So certainly, being flexible and being able to do all those things. So thank you for teaching us and working with us. We have enjoyed that. So a final question is, and maybe just some advice. So if you could provide, and I feel like you've done this through the entire session, but if there's other advice or advice that you would give somebody who would either want to pursue a career in like project management, transition planning, or in construction management, any additional advice that you'd like to share?
Well, I think there's a lot of information available on some social media platforms, LinkedIn being one of them. As we come into hopefully turning a corner here with the pandemic and in-person types of events, opportunities to network and to attend various symposiums, to make connections with organizations such as Healthcare Design or ASHE, certainly give you some tools to explore some of the aspects that you might be thinking about. And then, going to people who are doing what you want to be doing and having those conversations, buying them a cup of tea, sitting down, having a bite and some good conversation and being transparent. I think those are all great ways to step into a path that you want to explore a bit.
Great advice. So thank you very much for your time today. And I certainly have enjoyed. I'm almost down to my last drop here of this tea. So wanted to have a little bit of fun with rapid fire. So there's no right or wrong answers. They're all your own, but a morning or a night person?
Absolutely morning.
Me too. What type of milk do you put in your cereal?
I am an almond milk unsweetened vanilla gal.
Ooh. What was your last Halloween costume?
And actually it's right on the side of my office chair. It's an angel with very big wings so that when I put my construction vest on, the wings stick out the back of it.
I love it. The construction angel. What is your favorite city in the world?
Wow. Boy, that is a really difficult question. I haven't done all that much traveling, but I do love Stockholm.
Ooh, I have
I
never
have
been
been
there.
there. Yeah, it's
I'll
beautiful on the
have to
water.
add that to my list. So, do you like Disneyland?
I do like Disneyland, and for a period of time, I was an avid annual pass holder.
I feel like it's either a for sure yes or oh no. Do you Instagram your food?
I am not on Instagram as much as I am on Facebook, and I will admit to the fact that I have been known to post some delightful dishes.
I'm sure all of us appreciate that. So when I'm traveling, actually we look for those posts like what does the food look like, because you never know. If there's a spider in your house and you do you kill it or do you set it free?
I regretfully perhaps smash it in a tissue.
I would say I do the same, so it's too hard. Would you rather face a miniature hippopotamus or a giant cockroach, and both of them are in a bad mood?
Oh, I don't know. I might take the hippopotamus on. I think I could influence its behavior. I think we could get it right. Yes.
So I've been into Africa, and what they told us was they can't go up steps and stuff. So as long as you can run up the steps,
Oh,
I wouldn't want to test it, but I do remember that like specifically. And I don't know if they said that just so that we stayed in our huts or what, but I wouldn't want to mess with them. But a baby hippo, a mini hippo, just seems like it might be cute. So
they're so cute. And even as adults, I had a little behind the scenes excursion at the zoo where they let you have an encounter and you get to feed them watermelon. So I have an
that's so
affinity
cute.
for hippos. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Connie, for your time. And can you share your contact information with our audience so they can get in touch with you?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a profile on LinkedIn. And if you want to shoot me an email, I'm happy to get back to you. And that's constructionconnie@gmail.com.
Wonderful. So that'll do it for this episode of Transition Tea. So on our next episode, we'll be joined by another healthcare leader to chat over a couple of best practices, pour over new insights, and steep our next transition and activation experience. So we thank you for listening. And if you want to hear more conversations like this one, please subscribe to Transition Tea wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to see the live videos of our recordings, you can follow our Yellow Brick YouTube channel. So until next time, cheers.